This, as you may or may not notice, is a candy machine. The old kind that you can put a quarter in, turn it, and you get some kind of candy out of it. But today we're not talking about candy. Today we're talking about dice. Before I explain how putting dice in this is going to take your game to the next level in some really interesting ways, I should tell you how I came about getting it. And the short answer is I got it from a guy in Facebook Marketplace. My fiance purchased it and I went out and picked it up. And this guy had a garage full of these machines. He used to run his own business that comprised of a network of candy machines just like this. We bought it because we're getting married next month, actually, when I'm recording this, and we were intending to fill this with Tums and things like that for our wedding goers to be able to access in a fun way. And although that specific plan has fallen to the wayside, we can still use this for dice. We have a key that was provided to me, and it goes in the top, and we can unscrew the top of the machine just like this. That eventually unscrews this core, which is what held the lid in place. Then we take that off, and now we can do whatever we want. I am aware that most of you aren't sitting at home with a machine like this looking for a tutorial, so I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail, but in case you are curious, this is what the inside of the machine looks like. You have these adjustable discs. They're kind of those eye-shaped openings at the bottom. You can make those larger or smaller, in theory, to determine how much candy comes out or to allow larger or smaller pieces of candy. In our case though, this will do the same thing for larger or smaller dice. For example, these holes right now don't quite allow a full D20 to fit through it, but they do allow a D6. On this one, these holes are actually the perfect size for a D20, which I happen to have a lot of in that bingo wheel over there. Which, honestly, if we're talking about dice being in things that dice aren't usually in, this is another great option. But for our purposes today, I'm gonna open this up. And now this will function as a D20 dispenser. So we're gonna put a quarter in, we're gonna crank it. No dice. Let's try another one. Still no dice. Should be working. Oh, I didn't have this all the way locked in, and I don't have a lot of quarters. But thankfully, the same key that opens the top also opens the coin tray on the back. So we put that in here, and we give it a couple turns until that unscrews. We can pull this plate out, and then there's our quarters and some weird melted candy. Probably from like 1998. I wonder what it was. Gonna screw this back on. Okay, this has now been properly secured. I hope. We'll take a quarter, put it in. Hear that clank? 2 D20s. I think you'll usually get 1 D20 out of this, depending on your machine. How do we actually use this for Dungeons and Dragons, other than possibly making a very light profit off your players? One of your players might have an ongoing transactional relationship with a higher power. Your player could be a warlock or a paladin or a cleric or honestly really anyone, and every time they do something that pleases that god, they get a quarter, and they can save up their quarters, kind of like social equity with these higher powers. And when the time comes that they really need to cash in their chips with this higher power in order to aid in a situation, that's a 16. They can use this essentially as inspiration. They could cash them in all at once or just as they need them, one at a time. And something that makes a story better is the actual suspense, the moment where you have to walk over to this weird dice machine you have in the corner of your room to put a quarter in there that you've earned from a deity, turn the knob, and see how it affects your fate. But you don't have to do just D20s. In fact, you can do a little bit of everything. Now, the way you might utilize a mixed assortment of dice could really be up to you. It's like random stacked on top of random. You don't know what die you're gonna get, and you don't know what that die is going to roll on. This actually might be perfect for a homebrew wild magic surge, for example. You might be thinking, well, that's great, but you can only do so much with just getting dice out of a vending machine. And to that I say, you're right. There is only so much you can do with dice in a vending machine. But this one's still empty for a reason, because there is a third thing to show you that I didn't tell you about. It's not dice at all. It's something greater. But first, I need a beverage. Today's beverage is water, being consumed out of the Deck of DM Things mug, which you can now find in my merch store, linked in my description. It's actually very stylish with the red on the inside of the mug matching the red on the cards. But not only is getting one of these mugs or one of these shirts a great way to treat yourself, it's also a great way to help support the channel, especially when it comes to making longer videos like these. Anyway, back to the candy machine. Now we have D20s here, which are great for inspiration, or if you want a very dramatic death saving throw or something like that. Over here, we just have a mixture of random dice. But what about this middle one? I recommend these. These are called NFC tags. They're extremely cheap, but extremely useful, and I will leave a link to some in the description of this video. They're just these little white wafers that you should not eat, even if they're coming from a candy machine. These can be tapped by a smartphone, like this. Boop, the same way you would do Apple Pay or anything like that. But the twist is that these can be programmed to do all kinds of stuff. Each of these can be individually programmed to go to a different URL, and that URL could be a magic item, a weapon, armor, a homebrew magic item that you've uploaded to Homebrewery, for example. The sky is the limit. So you could program these and put them in your candy machine and then dispense them. They can actually dispense magic items from your candy machine, and they now have that magic item. But now I must acknowledge the very large, very handsome elephant in the room. You don't actually need an old candy machine to do any of what I'm talking about. You could put each of these in just a bowl, and you could still use coins to track equity with eldritch deities, or for a lottery of magic items, or however you would actually use the NFC tags. The moral of the story is to get creative and to have fun. But as always, the best ideas are usually in the comments. So please go to the comments and let me know how you would use something like this to really enhance your game. Let's see what I get here. You will now vanish in 3, 2, 1.